basically that the tongue kind of like is a bunch of muscles in a sense. It's like it's a kind of works like a bag filled with jelly that can be pushed and pulled in lots of different directions as you tighten different muscles that are attached to and intrinsic to the tongue.
Okay. And so the control of the tongue.
Mhm.
Well, here's what we want to do. I think is that let's talk about the sounds because we're going to get into the bits and the pieces and the
Yeah.
bobs that are responsible for making the sounds. This study contains what sounds?
Study's looking at some beatbox basics. It's looking at kick drums, hi-hats, and PF snares.
Now, so why would you choose basics,
Hmm.
but the study is about who's better and who's worse, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
to put it as crassly as humanly possible,
Who's
because
who's who like gets seen as a good beatboxer and who might be seen as a novice beatboxer or somebody who's still working up to excellence.
okay, so there are three levels then
Yeah,
in the study.
we've in the paper we call them advanced, intermediate, and novices.
Gotcha.
Hmm.
Okay, so then the tongue is one part of that. Okay, what parts are involved in what sound?
So the kick drum has the two lips coming together, then a release. The EF snare has the upper lip and the lower teeth and a f sound.
Mhm.
Sometimes the two lips come together, sometimes it's the upper lip and lower teeth. But it's these bits in the front of the mouth here. And then the closed hi-hat, it's the tip of the tongue touching somewhere just behind your teeth. A lot of the times we would call it the alveolar ridge, which is if you take your tongue and sort of like touch your teeth, just the back of your teeth,
Yep.
and then kind of slide it back some. Eventually, you might feel like a cavern kind of thing that pulls upward. That's that bump there is the alveolar ridge, and as your tongue pulls further back, you're getting toward your palate.
Okay. Now, I do have some anatomy software here, but I think
Right?
most people can feel if we give some instructions,
Hmm.
and most people who are beatboxing can kind of feel out what those things are. But
Hmm.
one of the things that I think the differentiator is how like how is that force created,
Mm.
right?
So the part that we left out when talking about how people talk or beatbox is the larynx,
Hmm.
sometimes called the voice box. It's sort of the cage that holds the vocal folds, sometimes called the vocal cords. Scientists call them vocal folds. Uh, and the force behind beatboxing isn't created, but well, at least behind these basic sounds, the kick drum and the hi-hat and the PF snare, for many beatboxers, the force is not created from lungs, like when you're breathing out while you're talking. The force is created from closing your vocal folds and then actually raising your larynx upward in order to create compression in the vocal tract. Um,
Okay. So the anatomy software that I have here can
mhm,
get into the specific bits and bobs, but
mhm.
you have something better. You have, I believe, the MRI footage.
Ah,
Someone let you put a beatboxer into a multi-million-dollar machine
mhm,
and make fart noises.
mhm. Well, only a couple fart noises. The rest are
Okay, so
beatbox noises.
a selective amount of fart noises. Okay, good. I thought people were going to get crazy for a second, but only if it's just a handful of fart noises, then that's
Well,
cool.
they did, but that's what beatboxing is.
It's pretty insane.
Yeah.
All right. Now I've gone to your website so many times that I feel like I need to have it bookmarked. And what ends up happening is I type in Google Dr. Reed Blaylock research, and then I get to your website, which will have like a CV thing,
Go all the way through here just to get to those
just to
videos,
get
huh?
to the MRI footage. And I've done
Yeah, all
this
right, all right.
way too many times. And you'd think that I'd just have the darn link research, particularly this research, because this is you do a lot. You scientists that you guys study things, a lot of
That's
things.
true. True.
So I'm
I go
gonna
to Google and then pick the fourth link down for me.
gotcha.
Yeah, uh-huh. But this is good too. Please, everybody go to my website. That's
Yes,
great.
and
Yeah.
this will be in the description of the final video. I will put this actually into the live stream chat so folks can follow along and play along.
Awesome.
So we have this is a lot of sounds.
It's a lot of sounds.
Well, let's stick to it. So we the kick as part of the sound set that you're working for in this study that you did, correct?
Mm-hmm.
That's actually a decently powerful kick.
Yeah, I couldn't hear it. I just want to make sure, like, it was I couldn't hear that sound, but it is coming over the audio for the
It is coming over the
for your
audio for the
stream.
live stream.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
yeah, yeah.
I know what it sounds like. I've heard it about a billion times, so that's fine. Yeah, it is. It's a good kick. I want to clarify two things. The first is that it doesn't sound like a normal kick drum, and that's because in the MRI, in order to get an MRI video, you have to put somebody into that very expensive machine that you said. But an MRI is very loud.
Yeah.
It makes like a big, loud, repetitive chunking sound.
Yeah. Is what's coming in over the audio, but
That's right. You also can't really. It's hard to get audio equipment in there
because of the magnetics.
because of the magnetics, because the electric field from the other electrical devices will mess with the processing of the MRI stuff. So at least the MRI that I know of, the machine that I know, is inside a Faraday cage. It's a cage that blocks out an electromagnetic signal as much as possible. It's in the basement of a building to like let some earth be in the way. And then it's in this cage that blocks things out. And the cage is like built into the walls of the room.
So you
And
not only to study beatboxers, it wasn't good enough to have a normal MRI.
I think a lot of MRIs are this way. I'm not an
Okay,
MRI
all right.
expert. That's the engineers who are responsible for that. I just use the videos. I collected some videos, but I just I
Didn't
don't
even
know all the
consider-
technology about it.
Yeah. I didn't even consider how to work around the video. So the audio is a challenge here. So
the audio is a challenge. The way they do it now at the lab that I was with at USC is they have a tiny little box that you can like thread some wires through, and you can sort of complicated. And again, I don't know all the details, but essentially they rigged up very cleverly this way to get a little bit of audio recorded close to the beatboxer's mouth so you can hear everything. But then they also have to try to take out the MRI sound so you can hear the beatboxing without hearing the really loud noise of the machine. So the beatboxing that you hear in these videos is going to sound kind of echoey. Somebody recently described it to me. It's like listening to beatboxing, but the beatboxer's in a tunnel or something. It's kind of muffled or a little metallic, or it doesn't have the same sound quality that beatboxing outside of an MRI would have.
Right.
You can still get a sense
Your
for
first concern
power of
is
these
not
things, but
audio fidelity. Yeah.
no, we were looking at because we're looking at what happens inside,
Right.
And we can get audio data some other way.
One of the things I couldn't help but notice, just speaking about what's happening
Yeah.
inside, her tongue is going back.
Okay.
So the tongue is reacting.
So
What's going on?
So okay, there's two things going on. One is that the position of the tongue in your mouth affects the resonance of your voice.
Okay.
This is how vowels work. The difference between e, a, a. It's partly maybe the opening of your jaw, but that's not true for everybody. Some people will do e, a with very little jaw or lip movement. It's a lot of where is your tongue situated inside your vocal tract? Where is the bulk of your tongue being moved to? That bag of jelly, where is it inside your vocal tract?
So when you're doing that, so as an opera singer, like this is what we do. We vocal resonance, like Ingo Tits is the thing, right? Like resonance is our everything. It is how we project over the orchestra. It is we train for years on every pitch, on every vowel, just so we can be loud and obnoxious.
That's right.
And we're really good at being loud and obnoxious.
Yes.
But so like the amount of volume you can get from maximizing the oral cavity just to maximize resonance is not a small thing.
No, it makes a huge difference. When you've got the resonance right, then you get a lot of power as an opera singer.
And I imagine the same is true here, that if you want to highlight a certain amount of power in your kick, there is not just a matter of how much you can compress your larynx to force whatever the physics is. I'll let you do that bit of the explaining of that. Right? So let's say that there is avenues of power that you can get. There's ways that you can have power. Among them, we're going to put down resonance, provided I could spell resonance, says the person who says their entire career is based off of it. Can't even spell it. We're not going to worry about it.
That's all right.
Right.
So resonance is a part of it, and in this case, it's not like an opera singer where, well, I want to say this. Described it like avenues of power, different ways to get to power. I sometimes think of it as like there's different dimensions of the power that you're getting, and all the different bits of articulation will affect those different dimensions in different ways. And any kick you do has all those dimensions in it, and they'll all be like at different values.
I like the idea of dimensions because it suggests they're trade-offs, which I think is a much better way to put it. For my own selfish purposes, I always frame it as like, here are the skills that you can develop. And so, but how you deploy them, then you have a decision-making sort of metric. Like
that's right, and that's part of the skill. That's what beatboxing artistry is. You get to decide how you want to make your sounds along all those dimensions, and your artistry comes out when you make choices that work for you and your audience.
Okay, so
so the tongue position and the resonance is going to affect, among other things, stuff like the deepness of the kick.
Okay, so if I have a forward, because this is interesting to me, opera, we try to have the tongue forward as much as possible, depending on the school of thought. Usually you want the tongue forward as much as possible. Not like, although there's some videos of Pavarotti hitting a high note where it's like, okay. But I see the tongue going back here. Knee-jerk reaction for me is, what are you doing? No bueno. But then I remember this is beatboxing, and beatboxing is a rebel.
That's true. So
this being the tongue for those who are
the big thing in the middle. Your tongue is really big.
It's massive.
It's massive.
Yeah.
It's not just the bit that you can see. It's all of your mouth is filled up with tongue.
It's huge.
It's a lot.
It's got a lot of different parts to it. It's great.
That's right. And so like we can talk about how those are differentiated and how different parts can move on their own a little bit. But talking about resonance, one way to think of it is like if you are filling up a water bottle or a jug or some like container of liquid, if you start to fill it up, like at a sink maybe, if you're filling up a bottle or a glass at a sink, if you listen to the sound that's made as the water hits the bottom of the glass and the rest of the water, it goes something like this.
Zoom is
that's bad. Okay, yeah. It goes from low to high.
Right.
As the water fills up, or whatever you're pouring into your glass fills up, we could call it the pitch, which is a loaded word, but the sort of the tone of the thing
it is for a very select few people that pitch is a loaded word. But sure, let's go with that. But for the purposes of this explanation and being as accurate as possible,
we can say that the pitch of the glass goes from low to high as the water fills up. And the reason that happens has to do with how much space there is between the top of the glass and the water level in there.
No, but the tongue doesn't inflate, right? So in this example with the bottle, and I'm sure you'll get to the reason, but I do want to particularly point out the difference is this is the brilliance of the skill set and being able to manipulate the tongue. So how is it because as you bunch up, are you highlighting certain frequencies the same way like we do with vowels, right? If we look at a vowel chart, we can see that. In fact, actually, let me get out a spectrogram because I'm cool like that.
Let's get out a spectrogram.
Yeah. You're even more excited than I am, which is how I know you're an actual scientist.
I love a spectrogram. Yeah. Ooh, it's okay.
So
this is good. All right.
If I go so, and for those who don't know, a spectrogram this is the frequency range, right? And this is translated to pitch, and then this is the timeline. And how bright the color is how loud, for lack of a better term, the frequency is for that given frequency. So you can see that I change my tongue to change the vowel. All of a sudden, what comes out is different. This is how we perceive the sound. Now, the characteristics of a kick are very, very particular in music. We spend a ton of time when we're talking about audio engineering on designing a kick. There are so many courses, philosophies, like just sound design in recording arts is a tremendous topic, and kicks, the kick drum, is the subject of papers, of people's careers.
And why is that? Why focus on the kick so much?
Because it's how you want to cut through a mix. And you have a particular genre of music, you have a particular set of instrumentations, or even in EDM, different idiomatic, different elements of different genres of EDM have certain synths that will take over melody, and they may be very high. Like if you have like hardcore or hard style, which is why I'm going to make a video on Kaji. He uses to get like a synth lead, which is really cool. So when you do a genre like that, your kick, in order to cut through the mix, actually has to have a lot of high end to it. And then you'll use different techniques like side chaining and stuff like that. And he does stuff with his mouth. So his choice of kick, which is inherently higher frequency, right? And it also will affect like, right? I use it all at the same time because he's a crazy beatboxer. But it's marvelous. And so like you're saying that this is just a kick that you can manipulate your tongue in such a way, and this is just the P kick or whatever it would call. So let me try doing it back and forth with the spectrogram here. You can even see. So I'm doing forward to back. Of course, this is not a good sample size because I'm moving and my kick is not consistent. But yeah, you can see that as the tongue is more forward, we have more higher frequencies, right? Which would make sense to me because that's kind of what we see with an E vowel where the tongue is the most forward. So it would make sense to me. And my logic could be flawed at any point, Mr. Scientist. So please correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it seems like as the tongue moves back, you're actually emphasizing lower frequencies the same way you would when you're doing an O or an ah.
That's right. And it's for the same reason that when you have a glass or a bottle that has a lot of space in it between the top and the water in it, that you get a lower pitch, and when you fill that up, you get a higher one. It's because it has to do with the space between the lip of the glass, whatever's behind it. Just like for a beatboxer, it's to do with the space between the lips of the mouth and the tongue behind. The bigger the space, the deeper the sound.
Okay, so this is interesting to me because I always think of the oral cavity. I don't think of the lips being closed when I think of it for my own purposes. But each sound has its own dimension and rule set and existence. So the space between the lips and not necessarily the root of the tongue, but like however you maneuver the tongue and however far back you can get it, you're going to have more space.
Right.
Wild. Okay, and that'll create the resonance and
This can be affected by all kinds of things, including
jaw tension,
like whether your lips are protruded forward or pulled back or something. So the tension and the like forward and back spacing of the lips can also make a difference. The difference between an ooh and an ooh is the one with the protruded lips is a bit more of an emphasis in the lower frequencies. Even small little things like the lips and like their positioning have an effect on the sound.
Vocoder mentioned to me, and I took like one of my 4 lessons with him. He mentioned to me that he finds it offensive, and I'm dramaticizing it. I don't think he found it offensive, but he found it offensive.
Yeah.
To the core of his being, that someone would think of a P instead of a B when using a kick. And it's funny because I was watching Alem and I was like, oh, he's definitely using a P. That extra tension allows you to do it faster, doesn't it?
Talking about tension in the lips?
If you're doing it, if you have a tighter lips, if there's less of a protrusion, that would make it closer to what we would generally consider, at least for American accents, what we would consider a P. Because this is where we're getting into some interesting differences. For whatever reason, I'll explain a little bit more. So that it's a little bit more clear. When Vocoder was saying P versus B, I know that PA wise, it's like one's voiced and one's not, and that's the difference. But what he was saying was that the B has more of a forward protrusion, which is the P is a tighter, like there's almost a retraction of sorts, and that depends totally on where you're from, what your accent is, and I imagine there's so many things there. But for some reason, I understood what vocoder meant when he said that, and that changed a lot of how my kick ended up sounding.
So artistry-wise, my position is if it works for you, then it's the right way to think about it.
Okay.
Because if it's making you happy and it's getting you the results that you want, then it's working.
Okay, so vocoder, I'm using a P.
Science-wise, we scientists, the more research we do, sometimes the more like narrow our focus. So I am not an expert on the tension in the lips for bilabial sounds, P's and B's, in any variety of English or in other languages. So I can't comment in particular on whether there is a sense that, well, the sense maybe. I can't comment on whether, like, in fact, there is a difference between the lip tension for a P versus a B. What I can say is that in the variety of English that I speak, which is pretty like white academic English, that's how I was raised, and that's what I do for my job. I'm an academic. There's a difference in how much air comes out of my mouth. I have a P versus a B at the beginning of a word. Like the difference between bit and bit. When I put my hand in front of my face and say pit, I feel a bigger puff of air. When I put my hand in front of my face and say bit, I feel a smaller puff of air. And it's possible that building up that puff of air for the P requires a little bit more lip tension or something. But the reason behind it would have to do with, well, a reason behind it would have to do with the aerodynamics, how much air is coming out. And that will also affect the power of the sound. How much air is coming out when you release, that'll affect the duration of the sound a little bit, the concentration of energy. Like get back to the power thing.
So this brings us to the other dimension, which would be air. So I'm actually proud of that segue. That was not the worst. That was not the worst segue in the world. Thank you for saving that one. I'm over here talking about P's and B's, and you're like, hot potato.
Yeah, right.
So, the air. We're talking at that point. Now you mentioned in the beginning that the sound is made with the larynx going up, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
For many beatboxers.
For many beatboxers, why are some beatboxers wrong?
No. One of our experts doesn't always do.
I know, I'm just joking.
Yeah, okay. I just want to.
Yeah. I'm just joking. Yeah. So continue. Mechanics.
Well, okay. So a lot of beatboxers. When I look at videos, like of beatboxers, just studio videos or beatboxers in competitions, or if I'm looking at the MRI videos that we have, a lot of the time I'll see larynx movement. You can see it for people with larynxes that are large enough to sort of protrude out. You have what might be called an Adam's apple. It's possible to see the larynx as it moves up and down.
We can name the thyroid cartilage, by the way. People on the channel.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Okay, so
we can get in. We can get into it. Yeah. I know. Like it's
what
like
a great channel. Okay, so you can see the thyroid cartilage moving up and down beneath the skin, and that can be affected by pitch. Like if your vocal folds are vibrating as you're vocalizing, changing pitch will affect tilt and some other things, and so things can move up and down. There's muscles in the neck that you can contract in order to raise and lower. There's all kinds of things that you can do. And for a lot of beatboxers, for your basics, kick snare, closed hi-hat, PF snare, there is this larynx movement upward. But there are also some beatboxers who choose to achieve that compresses the air above the larynx. That's an important part of the story. It's not just the larynx moves and suddenly you have a kick drum.
Right.
The lips are closed, larynx moves upward, and there's nowhere for the air to escape.
Because the vocal folds are closed as well? Is that an important part of the factor that the vocal folds are closed?
Yeah, the vocal folds are closed.
Okay.
And the velum is raised.
Right, so that air can't escape from the nose.
Air can't escape the nose. That's right.
For those, we'll explain that real quick. And actually, lovely, this is right in the MRI. This is the velum.
Okay. Yep.
So air can escape through the nose when the velum is down. When it's up, you close off your nasal passage. So what he's saying is that the vocal folds, which I guess are here, it's hard without the obvious.
A little higher. I see.
Like right here.
That's where they are, right there.
Okay.
I think, yeah.
Okay. These are the arytenoids.
I think that's an arytenoid there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the vocal folds right here, they close, then the velum closes, and you have, it's like popping a balloon. The air pressure has nowhere to go. Mm-hmm. And so by compressing the space, now help me how I would phrase this. The pressure of the gas, like atmospheric pressure is not the right word. What's the word that when you compress the space, the gas, help me out here.
It's a compression. It's there is a gas, there's air. The air gets compressed. It's compressed, and it probably is greater than atmospheric pressure.
Right. But so the compression is just the right word. We don't need to elaborate on that.
No.
Other than maybe the atoms or molecules become closer together, I guess is the
yeah. Pressure is like how many molecules are hitting the sides of their container per moment. And if you have the same number of molecules, but you decrease the amount of room they have to exist in, you're going to get more hits per moment than if you have a much bigger space. This is Boyle's law. Everybody who's taking a science quiz coming up here.
Okay, hold on. Boyle's law. I'm going to imagine it's not going to be spelled boils as in how water boils.
B-O-Y-L-E.
B-O-Y-L. Okay. So air compresses, parentheses, Boyle's law, and it's because the velum is raised, closing off your, I'm going to see what, there's a visual stimulus for those who.
Closing off your nasal passages, yeah.
We're going to do a spell check later, ladies and gentlemen.
That's all good.
Closing off nasal passages and then folds.
The vocal folds are closed, which means air can't be exchanged between the vocal tract and the lungs. And if we're talking about a kick drum, then the lips are closed together, so air can't move between the vocal tract and the outside world.
Okay. So now you said that there's another way to do this. So this is method 1, which is with the larynx.
Yeah, I want to do this with my students too. It's not because you did a great job writing it out. I just want to be clear about the timeline of this narrative. The lips close and the vocal folds close and the larynx raises. So there's a closed chamber. Then the larynx raises some. It's only after you have everything kind of closed off, then the larynx raises, and that's when you have inside your closed chamber the increase in pressure because of the decrease in volume.
Okay.
And that's important because when you are trying to learn how to beatbox, one of the most important things is timing. Like if you want to beatbox at speed, you need to be able to coordinate the closure of the lips, the raising of the larynx, the closing of the vocal folds, and the lifting of the larynx, and then the release of the vocal folds to get their air out when you're popping that balloon. All that has to be coordinated to really like small amounts of time. And if you get the wrong coordination, then you lose power.
This is a perfect segue because now we're talking about the skill difference.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to establish how do you make the sound really specifically, because your study goes into remarkable detail about the difference. Because, and this is why I think it's such a good. I wanted to look at like Alem, and I wanted to look at the Gillard versus Osis, but because I don't know what your timeline is today. It took us a lot to get into one.
I'm here for you.
Okay.
I'm taking a day to indulge in beatbox science.
Great. So this is when it comes to my channel. This might be a little bit more in terms of getting into one sound than is normal, but I love it. And generally, people love this level of detail. For those who do love it, because you're not going to get it anywhere. Which is welcome to Lesage singing. Anyway, so that's what you needed to figure out to analyze. Like, what was the order in order to figure out who makes a better sound or who's a better beatboxer in terms of skill level? You had to, I imagine, figure out how the sounds work, or was it a process of you in advance you had to know all of this?
Kinda. Kinda, yeah. So what we know from speech about similar kinds of sounds where you have full closure of the lips or the tongue tip to the alveolar ridge or something, and then the larynx, the vocal folds close and then lift. Those sounds are called ejectives. They're a class of sound. You can find them on the IPA consonant table, the International Phonetic Alphabet. They're used in many languages. They're very interesting. And so people who study speech articulation already sort of have identified what's required in order to get your ejective to work. We know from physics that in order to get sound to happen, air's got to be pushed and pulled in some direction. That's what your ear hears. The eardrum vibrates, and it vibrates because air molecules smack into it in a certain pattern. And so, in order for that to happen, somewhere else, air's got to be pushed and pulled. And in the vocal tract, that means there's got to be something happening. There's all kinds of things that can happen. But for these kinds of ejective sounds, the story is that it's the vocal folds closing and the larynx raising to build up some compression. So, linguists like me, some people who might know that. So, I got to bring that knowledge to beatboxing. I saw the vocal folds closing because I could see the arytenoid cartilages in the MRI. I saw the larynx raising, and I saw the velum was up, and I saw that the lips were closed for a kick drum. And I said, oh, well, that looks an awful lot like an ejective sound.
Okay, so you were just already woke to the situation when you walked in the room.
That's a loaded word. But,
Yeah. This one, I'll agree with you. That is a loaded word. But
I was aware.
Yeah, you were.
Yeah, I had the scientific training and a little bit of expertise to let me know what was going on. That's right. Yeah.
Right. So okay. So you came into this with the exact. So in a way, yes. The answer is yes. You did know all of this prior, and so you came into it with that knowledge of
But
how
I didn't
these
know
sounds
about
are
it for
made.
beatboxing. And
Okay.
so it was exciting to see in beatboxing some patterns like you might find in some spoken languages of the world.
Okay. And then by the way, I just want to get this out there for folks so they understand you better. You are a linguist, and that is you are the lens in which, because there's many. We use beatbox scientist because it looks great on a thumbnail, but there's many different kinds of scientists who work on this sort of thing.
That's right.
And so the way that I like to phrase it is there's a lens to which you view this subject matter. It is through the lens of linguistics.
That's right.
So
It's through the lens of linguistics. It's also through the lens of someone who's not a beatboxer. I think that's important too.
that's not fair because I heard you practice to a tutorial.
Did. That's true. I'm not a beatboxer.
Okay.
I'm no professional.
So this is the moment here where we're going to take we're going to break it up a little bit because we're going to get into the science, but it is extremely important that you and I demonstrate our ability to do a kick drum. For that reason, I have brought up a wonderful tutorial by someone who I completely and utterly respect, who is known for making lots of sounds in a very short period of time. King of the French bias. And so I'm going to bring this into, if we were just filming this, how does the kick drum work? Now,
Yeah.
So I'm recording again because we didn't finish that thought that you had that there is another way to kick drum.
Yeah, that's right.
Talk
And
to
I've
me.
said I'll talk about it.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
The larynx moving up is just one way to do a kick drum. Here's another way. And this is information from a study that was put out in 2024 by a team of scientists who study a lot of things, including beatboxing. They have their own MRI data. This is Alexei Underdown and his work, which I love. They looked at a beatboxer, and they like a great expert beatboxer, and they looked at movements of not just the larynx, but also the tongue, and specifically the root of the tongue, like the back of the tongue, and the pharynx, which is the sort of wall that is what you think of when you think of the back of your throat.
All right, let's get up the MRI footage
Oh, yeah.
and just and point that out so people have that visual. So
Great.
the pharynx is right here.
That's
right?
the pharynx there. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
And the root of the tongue is also there. It's sort of the bit that one of the bits that you saw moving before there, and a little bit further up too.
A
Yeah.
little bit further up. Okay, so like
Yeah.
right here would be the epiglottis kind of thing. It's a little hard to see.
Yeah, the epiglottis is probably like sort of
It's a little hard to
melded into
see,
the.
like right here-ish.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's right. Yeah. And so the root of the tongue can move around You can sort of see it like just above the epiglottis. You'll see sometimes like a little bit bulge out toward the pharyngeal wall. Um,
Like right. Yeah.
Somewhere in there, yeah. So they looked in that study, they looked at this beatboxer and found that that beatboxer didn't move their larynx up and down very much. The vocal folds were still closed, but the difference in pressure was created more by changing the position of the tongue root and the pharynx.
I didn't even think
I'm
to
pretty sure it's
contract the pharynx. I guess they would be the muscles around the pharynx. Well, we would have
so
to break down the
I've heard
muscles of the pharynx, correct, to
I
discuss
am
this?
not a pharynx expert. I've heard
Yeah.
different things about this, and if you are not sure if you can contract the pharynx, one way to think about it would be that you have sometimes widened the pharynx, then release the widening to go back to an earlier state.
God, that's a
But
lot
there
of
are
muscles.
muscles there that can affect things.
That's a lot. That's a
It's a
lot going
lot.
on. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's squeezing happening in there,
Yeah.
basically. So okay.
Could you
So
technically put all of that together too, if you wanted
yes.
maximum power?
We see in our beatboxers in the MRI, we see movements. You saw it of the tongue. The
Yeah.
tongue as it's moving around. It's not just making changes to resonance, it's also probably contributing to the changes in air pressure. And I think we see that later on with some of the PF snares as well, for at least some of the beatboxers. I want to throw out one more because
Mhm.
that's doing the kick drum with the vocal folds closed, but using different kind of musculature. Another way that you can do a kick drum is with air pressure from the lungs. And our data set with the beatboxers that we looked at, the one of the experts used we call it pulmonic egressive air pressure, pulmonic from the lungs, egressive out into the world.
Mhm.
They breathed out during their PF snare. The PF
Yeah.
snare has a little bit more like a noisy frication at the end, so it kind of wants maybe some pulmonic egressive airflow sometime, especially if you're holding it out a while.
Yeah.
Um,
For the fricket of the yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. But a lot of beatboxers in our data set too will do it with that glottalic or laryngeal airstream where the vocal folds close and then punch up. So you can do a PF snare a couple different ways. And I would say that probably means you can do a kick drum a few different ways too. If you don't like, or you, in some moment for artistic reasons, you don't want a glottalic kick drum with the laryngeal based airstream, you can do a pulmonic one instead. But the trick is to make sure that the quality of the air release resembles what in the beatboxing community is like works as an aesthetic kick drum, or that you're intentionally deviating from the community patterns, I
Right.
guess. Like it's a choice. You get to choose different kinds of airstream, you get to choose different amounts of airflow, and those choices are going to affect what the sound is that you get, and they'll affect the power too. So like if you're doing a pulmonic kick drum, you'll have a lot more air behind your kick drum. It would be great for a really breathy style of beatboxing. If you don't want a breathy style, if you want a bit more of a crisp and clean style, then you don't want pulmonic airflow. You probably want something laryngeal instead.
This is where I'd love to get into, because one of the things that's great about with our selection of the videos we're going to watch, we're going to watch Gillard versus Osis.
Hmm.
Gillard doesn't do well. I mean, you'll probably be able to better communicate this than me, but a lot of the sound banking, like the amount of sounds in his arsenal, not as crazy diverse as historically a lot of champions have had. And instead, what he's doing is that there's a selection that's really choice and incredibly strong and powerful and refined. And one of the things that I wanted to get at, and why thank you for coming on and breaking this down, because getting power is not a mindless task. It is incredibly involved to be a differentiator. I wanted to. We'll get into the next part of the video, or the next video, which is we're going to be discussing the study itself, and then maybe at another time we'll get into the breakdown of different sounds, because you got a lot of sounds, and all of them. I would love to do a video on each and every sound.
Oh, we can try. Yeah, great.
Yeah, I mean, maybe not today, but like
No, not today,
because
but another time. Yes, that
yeah.
sounds good.
But so we'll do that for sure. But I would love to get into just Gillard and watch that battle with you, if you would be so kind as to
Yeah.
listen to some beatboxing with me.
Yeah. I love listening to beatboxing.